Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today, bit of all sorts as is often the case. Going to do a report on my day out yesterday at the bonsai nursery. I know it's not orchids, but trip out, I'll keep it relatively short. Did I buy anything? We'll have a very quick look at that, but for a more elaborate look, obviously that'll be on the bonsai channel. Link in the description if you want to take a wander across and subscribe while you're there. I've also got a box to open. Again, not orchids, but it's a box to open. We'll have a look at that, and we'll have a look at some plants. And I thought we've had a look at cattleyas recently. We've started doing a shelf at a time, which is like a random bunch of plants. I've done a couple of those, and decided to include the racks as part of that. Half a rack, one side of a rack constitutes a shelf, yeah, so we've included those as well. But what I thought we'd have a look at today is Oncidiums in general, but go through the Oncidium alliance is quite large and includes quite a few genera, and I thought we'd have a look at some of the genera that I've got that represent the variables, because you've got, you know, from cool growers to warm growers to highlight to shady, and combinations in between. And when you get into the generics, well, anybody's guess basically. So let's get going. Right, so yesterday's day out then. I didn't start at the crack of dawn, on the grounds that the place doesn't open till 10 o'clock, and even though it's a Saturday, there's traffic issues still in the earlier part of the day. So I thought we'll let all that die down and then we can have a nice leisurely drive. That was the theory. Best laid plans and all that. So I left here at about 9:30 in the morning. The idea was to drive to where the bonsai nursery actually is, and I had a look on the map and then did a Google drive-by. There's a garden centre like 300 or 400 yards from the nursery that had coffee shop, snacks. I thought, right, well we can go there and perhaps get some lunch. And the bonsai nursery has no facilities. You're allowed to use the outside toilet as part of the house, but that's it. You know, so there's no drinks, nothing. So I thought I'll get myself some lunch and a drink before I go to the nursery. So that was the plan. And we had severe restrictions on the journey, and that's the polite version. Bearing in mind I've got about 5 miles to go from home before I get to my dual carriageway. That then leads to a motorway, which leads on to another motorway, which then leads on to an A road, a lot of which is dual carriageway, which then leads on to the M25 London Orbital, which I then turn off onto a dual carriageway which takes me almost to the bonsai nursery. And it was 102 miles. That should not have taken over 3.5 hours. I just sat still a lot of the time. You're on a 4-lane road and nobody's moving. This country really is hopeless at dealing with traffic. Anyway, I got there, the little cafe actually did hot meals, so I had a nice hot lunch and a nice coffee, sit down sort of thing, and a rest, and stop cussing and swearing about the journey I'd just done. Oh, just get so annoyed when you build these huge roads like that and they're not big enough, because there's bottlenecks on them. There's problem areas that are not anticipated by people who plan traffic. If that's your job, mate, and that's the best you can do, I suggest you go and sell tea somewhere, because you're no good at it. Anyway, journey over. I got to the bonsai nursery. I didn't spend too long there. It's not very big. It's somebody's back garden in effect, converted into a nursery. There's shade tunnels, there's like covered areas with the pots and things, and the guy works in like a sunroom sort of thing you'd have in your garden with a glass front and that. And he sits at his bench and he works there. Basically he only opens weekends now. It's Ken Laver, and he only opens weekends. You can go there weekdays by appointment, but the wording sounds a little bit like he'd rather you didn't, because he'd obviously have to be there and just hang around while one person has a walk around the nursery. It's not very economic for him to actually do that. So that's why I went to the weekend. There were only a couple of other people there. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 4 other people walking around at the time. So we'll just let the cat in. Come on, nuisance. That was Elvis, who has spent about 6, maybe 7 days without going outside once. Something's frightened him out there, I think. That's what's happened. And he keeps going up to the door, and then he just turns around and sort of trots away at a reasonable pace. But the last couple of days he's started going out. But he won't go out there if Mojo's out there. He'll only go out if he can go out on his own and have a wander around. So anyway, that was my day out. I did get some trees. You can have a very quick look at them now, because a lot of people on this channel are not interested in bonsai trees at all. But I got myself a Japanese white pine with plans. It's not a young tree with a base this thick. That's actually quite an old tree. But Japanese white pine are painfully slow growers, especially in our country. So they're grafted onto black pine, which is much more vigorous. And some of the grafts are ugly, to say the least. That one's not bad. And this has already got a large extension on the top. That will make all this down here a lot thicker by leaving it there, and then eventually it can come off. So that's that one. And then I bought, effectively these are Satsuki azaleas. They're evergreen azaleas. They have lovely flowers on in all sorts of colours. This one looks like it's pink and cream, or it could be red and pink. The trouble is, when you get a photo on a label, they fade, so you're never quite sure. But this masks a lot of beauty, because although that just looks like a bush, inside that bush is some lovely shape. And by the time I spread these branches out, I won't be able to do much with that this year, because the way these work is, after they flower, you cut them back to where you want them to branch and shoot out, and they do that for the rest of the year. But as they're doing it, they're forming their buds for the flowers for the following year. Yeah? So if you prune them after that point, you're cutting your flowers off. So that won't get anything done to it this year. So that's that. So I bought a couple of trees, and thank you to Gail, because a fair part of what I spent yesterday is a birthday present from a viewer. So thanks to that, I'll send you an email, and then you can decide what to do. No obligation, but it was an offer, so I took the lady up on it. That's that. It's probably a bit late for you to follow this up now, but I did do a plug on my Halloween mug, and quite a few people went and bought one. We didn't get anywhere near the limited edition limit by any means, so I'm just going to leave it there. So it didn't really work as a limited edition. I didn't get the rush I was expecting, let's put it that way. But not everything works. And with the site that does the merchandise for the channel, as the owner of the store, you have an option to have a sample, which means you get it at base cost. So all you're doing is paying for the goods and the shipping. So I decided to get one for me. Oh, that's an excellent box. So, well, those of you who didn't have one, now you get to see it. I chose the purple because I like it, and I'll see how close I can get. It's got it's got an option of having my standard logo on the back, like on the other merchandise. It's just got my logo with some words in the middle, Roger's Orchids, and then that was the actual Halloween design with a sort of scary, creepy cat and the saying, as a cat, yeah, it is the cat speaking, as a cat, I will return to haunt people. I've made a list. So that was the design I did. Choice of colours and everything, but it was a little bit of fun, basically, that was all. So I got myself one. So that's that out of the way. Things to come. The next thing I'm going to film, I will be filming today. Providing nothing changes, and I don't suddenly change my mind, behind me is a section of garden. Now I'm getting somebody in to do the heavy stuff. I'm going to have a go. Later today, when I've done my filming and I've sorted the videos out on the computer, I'm going to get out there with the tools and the broom, and I'm going to make a start and see how far I get before, one, I get fed up, or two, I get too tired to carry on, or three, I've made such a pile of rubbish to clear up that I'm not prepared to make it any bigger until I've cleared up. And I'll just lift the camera. It can stay on the tripod, but it'll have to wiggle around, and I'll have to turn the screen round so that I can see what I'm filming. So basically I'm going to make a start here, and if you have a look up, that goes up quite high, but obviously the stuff that goes up high starts down here, so by just cutting it off it'll fall on the ground, and I can then cut it up into smaller pieces that I can, you know, just either throw in the car or put in bags and put in the car. This first bush here has flowers on in February before the leaves come out, so that will get a little trim. That will take me 2 minutes. The bush next to it will just be trimmed and shaped. The next one, which is virtually the same, that's going to get cut back almost to the ground because it's hiding a rose bush and a fuchsia. You can just see the blooms on the fuchsia in the corner there. And prior to doing all that, all these tubs are going to get moved somewhere else. So I don't want them here. I'm going to have a good sweep up and get rid of all this rubbish on the ground. The bird table and the bird bath will have to move while I'm doing this, or they're just going to get knocked about. And I'm going to see if I can do that section up to where that fuchsia is in a single session. And if I can, then I should be able to do up to the tree in the next section. That's that side done in 2 goes. I need the weather. I'm not doing this sort of stuff in lousy weather, either freezing cold, blowing a gale or raining. We don't do that sort of work in that weather. But it's supposed to be sunny all day today and most of tomorrow. So we'll give it a go. And then we'll worry about the rest of the garden in another session. Right, let's just plonk that back somewhere near it. Now I need the camera. I'll have to move the camera to a different place now, because if I'm going to start getting orchids out I need access. So we'll plonk it there. What does that look like? Yeah, that'll do. There's enough light, it's even light, so if I hold a plant here it's not going to be in shadow, so it should be okay. Right, and we will have a look at some Oncidium types that typify the different things that you will come across in the Oncidium Alliance. And we can have a chat about their different requirements and things. And I won't be able to get at all of them. I don't plan on getting at all of them. I plan on trying to grab hold of some representatives. Yeah? And I'm going to start with one out of here. Now this is a twinkle. They are popular Oncidium types, and there are quite a few of them. There are also some named twinkles. Often these are a twinkle that you can get hold of that have been crossed back with one of the parents. So it's like a named registered variety of twinkle that's then crossed back. But they are in the main miniature plants. They do not take up a lot of space. When they're growing vigorously, they like to stay moist, so they like to drink. And they need a bit of feed to push them on as well, but you're not going to need a lot of space for these. They don't need high light, they need good light, nice even good light, and they would prefer reasonable temperatures. They're not warm growers, they can take low temperatures. I mean, you know, these are classed as intermediate. They'll go down to 12 degrees at night. It's not going to hurt them. They're okay with that. If they can stay a little bit warmer, they might grow a little bit more vigorously. That's the thing. With the ones that can accept those low temperatures, doesn't mean to say they need it. It means they'll put up with it. But they might do a bit better if it was a bit warmer. Now, the twinkles are fundamentally primary crosses. So they're two Oncidium, genuine Oncidiums, not weirdos, crossed together. And when that happens, there's a variety of colours that have managed to be produced. So you've got, this is Tiny Twinkle, that's his name, and it is actually a little bit smaller than some of the others. And that's basically white. All of the twinkles have a yellow centre. The reason they have a yellow centre is that both of the parents have a yellow centre. Even though they're different colours, they still both have a yellow centre, as do many, many Oncidium types and genera. It's just a trait. Yeah? So anyway, twinkles. Quite rewarding, because they do have quite long spikes with many, many flowers on, and they're all fragrant. And some of them are highly fragrant, so they're worth it for several things. Blooms don't last a million years, you know, they don't last for ages, but you get a good show from them. But they're one of those that are not for the impatient, because when you see a spike starting, don't hold your breath. It could be 4 months before the blooms open. Spikes grow, and they grow, and they grow, and they keep growing, and then they show little buds, and those buds aren't buds, they're little branches. And then the branches start to show little buds, and then the buds sit there, and they take a long time from the point you see the spike to the point your first bloom opens. Rewarding little plants. I've always got a lot to say for twinkles. Well worthwhile. And they don't take up the whole shelf like some do. So that's a look at a twinkle. And then we'll go straight to one of the parents, and I can show you what I mean about the spikes. This is a very poorly grown, so I thought the camera was still over there. Sorry, I'm on camera too. This is a poorly grown Oncidium sotoanum, which is one of the parents of the twinkles. But that's what we're talking about with the spikes. That's a typical spike for this type of plant, and that trait of long branching spikes passes down to the twinkles, as this is one of the parents. And and also this bulb has got a spike coming out both sides. When I had my really vigorous sotoanum before I lost it, that's what's left of it basically, I had 6 spikes coming out of one pseudobulb, but that was when it was being grown incredibly well. And do you know how I messed it up? We had a lot of hot weather and it dried. A couple of times during that time it dried out, and the roots just frazzled and became non-functional. So the plant just desiccated. It lost its root system while it was actively growing and pushing up spikes. So I completely ruined the plant. It's never really recovered properly since, but this latest growth has put 2 spikes out, and then hopefully we'll get a stronger new growth next time round. And if ever I see another good one of those, I'll get it. Now, I could be sticking my neck out and this could be wrong, but I'm reasonably certain that this, which is Chirophorum, is actually the other parent. Now, sotoanum is purple. It's a pinky purpley colour with a yellow centre. Smallish blooms, not tiny but smallish, and very, very fragrant, highly fragrant. This is the other parent. Again, you see the trait with the spike branching, and the buds are starting to form on here. These blooms are tiny, these are small, and it's quite a compact little plant as well, which is what dwarfs down the Sotoanum to get the twinkles. And these are yellow. So as far as I know, that's the other parent, reasonably sure. Right, so that's that. Now this Oncidium type is Aliciara. Now that's an intergeneric. Don't ask me what's in it, you can Google it, look up, you know, and it'll tell you what genera go into the mix. But I think an Aliciara contains at least 3 different genera, possibly 4. Because of the variety in the mix that go into these, and you have to bear in mind, like, if there's Brassia in it, which I think there is, well, there are many different types of Brassia. Some of them are huge plants and some of them aren't. So again, you know, just because that's the list of genera that go into the intergeneric, it's not going to tell you how big it's going to get, because the variety is in those individual genera as well. But this one is a small to medium plant. It's quite vigorous, or it is now, it's been rescued, and when that has a spike, the spike will go quite quickly. I was going to say when, I ought to say if. It hasn't bloomed for over 3 years now, if not more. But the spike will push on at a reasonable rate, and it will have blooms along that spike. There won't be any branches on this one. Yeah. That's that particular one. It doesn't mean to say there wouldn't be on others. Right, what else have we got then on this shelf? I think I'll leave that shelf now. Now we'll just have a look at this one, because this is also a typical intergeneric. And this is Oncidium Tahitian Dancer. And I believe that one of the plants that goes into the makeup of this one is actually Oncidium Sotoanum. And as you start looking around the Oncidium hybrids, and possibly with the introduction of some other genera into generics, you'll find Sotoanums in there quite a bit. And it's mainly because it's a vigorous grower, it puts vigour into the hybrid, and it's fragrant, and it normally passes that fragrance on. If it had bigger blooms, it would get used even more. But this is Tahitian Dancer. This is a more typical intergeneric, in as much as it has a tendency to climb. Now, the rhizome on this one is tight, so the bulbs are touching each other, so they're nice and short, so you get a compact plant. Now, on some Oncidium types, you'll get, you know, like 1, 2, or possibly even 3 centimetres before the new bulb grows. And they creep across the top of the pot, and they're out the edge of the pot in no time at all. And then all the roots are aerial, and then when you try and repot it and you put those aerial roots into a pot with some media, they often die, because you've changed their makeup. Roots adapt to whatever they hit when they first grow. So when these brand new roots grow on Oncidium types, if they grow into moss, they're going to like moss. And if you repot those roots from moss into bark, the chances are they'll fail. And if you do it the other way round, they might fail. They don't like the change. So when your new roots are coming out, try and get them to grow into the media that you want them to stay in. And that's the time to change your media. So this is a nice compact one, but along the lines of these that do grow out away from the plant a bit, you know, from 1 centimetre up to, well, 2 or 3, so you get a gap between the bulbs, they also have a tendency to do that. So as the bulb starts to grow, there's a gap underneath it, and those roots have got to bridge that gap to get into media, or again they become aerial. So when you're choosing these, if the plant is big enough, it's often worth having a look to see how long the rhizomes are between the bulbs. The shorter they are, the more compact the plant. Now again, that Tahitian dancer, that will have a long spike that will take a long time to grow, it'll branch and it'll have lots of smallish blooms on that are fragrant, which is why I got it. Why is it going to look like that? It's got sotoanum as one of the main ingredients. I'll call them ingredients. Right, now we'll move from there to, where the hell is it? Here it is. Oh, here is one. I'll get two out. Now, do these look any different? Well, not really, but there is a hell of a difference in this one, because I bought this one and it's planted in rock wool cubes, which if I touch I'll get a rash, so I have to stay well away from it. So this was bought last year in bloom, and this is an odontoglossum. And to all intents and purposes they look like many other Oncidium types, very like other Oncidium types. I have a shriveled rotten pseudobulb on there that is so close to the new growth that I can't take it off without endangering that new growth, so it'll have to stay. This new growth should bloom, and once it's bloomed I'll have had it long enough to see a complete cycle, and I need to see that complete cycle to see when the roots grow and how well they grow, and there's one new root just showing. So the roots are starting as the bulb is heading up towards full size. It's not mature, it's not attempting to form a bulb yet, it's just growing. So at some point we should get a spike on there. Now that's an odontoglossum. They are cool growers, they do not like heat. Yeah? They also don't like bright light. Yeah? And many odontoglossums and the hybrids have been reclassified as Oncidiums. So if you look at it, it does look quite like any other Oncidium, apart from being not a high quality plant. It's a bit shriveled. I'm hoping to work on that. So when you buy one, if it's been reclassified as an Oncidium, which are intermediate, some are even heading up towards the warm growth, and it's been reclassified as Oncidium, you've lost your ability to know that it's a cool grower and doesn't like heat and doesn't like bright light. You've had that wiped out by renaming it an Oncidium. So well done guys, really useful. Anyway, that's one. I'll do pop-ups with the blooms on some of these, not all of them. And then this one I've been rescuing for some time, and I think I've finally got the flipping thing because it's growing a nice strong new growth. Again, this is an odontoglossum. This came from McBean's on a visit quite a few years ago now. And I messed this one up through fear. And I'd been growing some time at that point, but it was the fact that I got it from McBean's. It's sort of in my mind, it's sort of all of a sudden it got really special. And I mean, I chatted to Jim Durrant, the guy who was the main man there, and he told me all about repotting and media and everything, because it was a tour, you know, it was a guided tour. And yeah, I thought, well, we'll buy a couple. And we bought some large seedlings, shall we say, not big mature plants anyway, the flipping plants there were ridiculously expensive. Well, some of them are incredibly rare crosses that have been done by McBean's and don't exist anywhere else. So, you know, they're supply and demand and all that. And basically, I forgot to ask how long the plants have been in the pot. Oh, that went out of focus then. Let me just have a look. I was going to say, I have to keep my eye on the battery because it might go soon. And basically they came potted in quite large pots, and I was frightened to repot it, and I left it in the pot too long, and when I did come to repot it I'd lost the root system and I had to start again, and it's taken a long time. But we now have a strong new shoot, yeah, and we have roots, so recovered. Not still a full-grown plant by any means. Right, so that's that. I won't do too many more because they start getting a bit samey after a while. But let's have a look at well, Miltonias. Miltonias are in the Oncidium Alliance, and these can grow quite big. Now, we've looked at these recently, so I'm not going to spend much time on there. But these like quite a bit more light than some of the others to get more blooms on your spikes. They'll probably bloom okay without it, but you won't get as many blooms. And they rarely branch, and they don't have lots of blooms, but the difference is they have much larger blooms. And yeah, they're quite vigorous growers. Paler leaves than a lot of Oncidiums, but in this case in here, that's because they were on the top shelf this year because of their size, and perhaps they shouldn't have been. This is another intergeneric. I'll have to tidy this lot up in a minute. And this is a medium-sized plant, has darker green leaves. Darker green leaves normally implies it will take more light, but it might just have been kept out of bright light, and so the leaves tend to be darker. And if you put it in brighter light, as a change of light, you might get some light burn, you might get some yellow patches. But again, this is a intergeneric, and where the buds were going to come out, I'd forgotten what this looked like. The buds have turned into branches, and the branches are now forming the buds. And as you can see, that's quite a long spike, but it's totally self-supporting. Not all of them are. And a lot of them will push a spike out and immediately arch it. The brassicas tend to do that. You don't get many brassicas with an upright spike, but that is bolt upright, so it doesn't need staking. Now, with the weight of the blooms, I might wish I'd staked it, but there's several others coming out here. And this is an example, this is a good example of what I meant by the pseudobulbs creeping upwards as they progress, so that eventually you end up with a bulb that's away from the media. It's climbing slowly but surely. And some of them do that. Now that's an intergeneric that's got some form of odontoglossum in it. Somewhere buried in there. Because of the size and shape of the blooms, I can tell that. But when you get a lot of the intergenerics, especially the sort of mass-produced ones, you won't get a name, and therefore you don't know what's in it. Therefore your care is guesswork unless you can deduce what's in it to a degree from the shape and size of the flowers. Now this is one that is growing on. Now that's a brassia, and these new growths are nowhere near full size yet. These will get quite large. The spikes on this is Brassia vericosa, so it's a species, but it's a named variety, sea breeze, came from Burnham's. And this got hacked to pieces and potted up with just like back bulbs and new growths. So these are not strong plants at the moment, but it will be. And all of the new growths have got room to put out another new growth without repotting. But good strong leaves, and the spikes on that are well over 1 metre long. And the blooms on it, spider orchid, brassias, spider orchid, so very spindly petals and sepals, and quite a small lip in the centre, representing the body of the spider. The blooms on this one are 8 inches from top to bottom. You can do your own conversion to metric stuff. I'm all right up to about 5 centimetres, and any bigger than that I seem to switch back to inches. Well, you know, most of my life I've had to deal with inches. The metric stuff is relatively new. Right. So really you're looking at such a variety, it's difficult to tie them down with the, so I'm just checking this battery again. It's getting there, it's not far off. I shall have to put a spare one in to process all this and get it off the camera. Yeah, so you've got a variety. Up the cool end, you've got Cotyledons and Odontoglossums. Those are the coolest ones that I know. And then you come into, there's Oncidiums proper, and within the Oncidium genera, the genuine article, there are cooler growers and warmer growers. So there's a variety of temperature ranges. And within there, there are some that don't like the light too bright and some that would prefer the brighter light. And that's just in the one genus. And then when you start mixing and matching, you know, when you start taking an Odontoglossum and introducing Brassia and perhaps chucking Oncidium sotoanum in there to guarantee the fragrance, you're starting to get a mix. So you're starting to get bright light with much lower light, warmer growers with cooler growers, and you end up with a mixture. And the care for that one is hit and miss. You just have to do your best. I always sort of say, if in doubt, run down the middle. Intermediate, medium to bright light, and don't keep it too wet. Most of them do not like to be soggy. And the root systems on these can vary. Brassia root systems are quite chunky, quite sturdy. And then you get something like sotoanum, a well-grown plant, is quite a big plant. And the roots are really fine. And that's where the twinkles get their fine root systems from. Very fine rooted sort of plants. So that's, you know, there are others. We've got the fussy one. I've just about got enough battery left. i.e. Miltoniopsis. Not to be confused with Miltonias. Do that at your peril. Miltoniopsis. Cooler growers. Come from cloud forests. In the wild, I think there are 5 species, so very low numbers as well, but they are distinctly different from the Oncidiums, mainly distinguished by the single leaf at the top of the bulb, whereas all the others will have 2 leaves, and a grey-green colour to the leaves as well. But these are fussy. They're stressed by many things. And if you introduce more than one stress level to them, they start going downhill relatively quickly in some cases. They don't like bright light, they don't like heat, they don't like to totally dry out, they don't like soggy roots, they don't like stale media or media that's a bit acidic. Any one of those and the plant's not going to thrive. It might hang in there. Introduce 2 and you will get a downward slope. Introduce 3, it's going to die. They're fussy. The most important thing with those is they don't like bright light and they don't like heat. Look after your roots. More important than the plant. Look after the roots. So yeah, another cool grower in amongst them. And Miltoniopsis and Miltonias will go into intergenerics. Miltonias are often mixed with Brassias, you know, so all this lot gets jumbled up together. But they can be rewarding and they can be cussed. They can be your own nightmare. And a lot of that is based on starting with a good one. Yeah? One that's got a good root system. One that doesn't immediately need repotting as soon as you get it home, so that you get the chance to repot it at the proper time, which is totally independent of the calendar. The proper time is when the new roots are growing. Yeah, that's the time to change the media. And if you have to change the media dramatically because what it's in doesn't suit your way, then make sure you do it at that time and look after it, mollycoddle it during that change. And if possible, do it a bit at a time. Like if it's in pure moss and you want to put it in bark, because bark suits you better, cooler temperatures perhaps, then don't take it from moss to bark, take it from a mix. So take it from moss to a mixture of moss and bark, and then next time take it to bark, a bit at a time. Anyway, that's it for today, and as I said, I'm hoping to get this processing done. That's why I started early in the day, and then get my tools out and go out there and start and see how far I get. I might not get very far at all, it might be too cold, but I'll see how I go. I'd like to make a start, I'd like to do something. I'm not trying to avoid getting the guy in, but I'm just worried that I'm going to get a bit of a bull in a china shop out there. Whereas if I do it myself, I can make decisions at branch level, at bush level, rather than just zzz, you know, with the big mechanical jobbies. So I'll see what I can do. And thanks for dropping by. Thanks to all the subscribers and everything, and the patrons, all that sort of stuff. It is the Sunday one, we do that. And as I said, there's a bonsai video up and running now of my visit to the bonsai nursery, with just a bit of music and the clips. And then a decent look and analysis of the trees that I bought will follow on. I'll probably film that tomorrow, or later in the week. No rush, as they say. And yeah, thanks for dropping by. See you next time.